Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Khurram Shahzad Mughal, and I would be teaching you a course in public finance. Before we start with the course, I would introduce myself to you guys. I did my MBA in finance and investment from NUST Business School, and after that I started my job in a public sector organization where I worked for almost 10 years. And during that time I left for a PhD in economics from Austria through a higher education commission scholarship. I joined the doctorate program in 2006 and I finished around 2010, and after that I came back to Pakistan and I have been associated with academia ever since. Now, this course, public finance or public economics, is a very important field of economics, which not only affects a country's aggregate economy, but it also affects the individuals at a micro level. Therefore, it is imperative to study public finance in detail. During this course, we would be covering various topics, like first we would be starting with the introduction to public finance, then evaluating public finance and role of the government, public goods and externalities, public revenue, theories and principles of taxation, effects of taxation, public expenditure, theories and principles of public expenditure, and public debt and its management. These are all very important topics, and we hope to go through them through all these lectures that we are having. What we hope to achieve through this course is that after this course the student should be able to understand the reasons behind various government policies and the effects of those policies on the aggregate economy and the individual, and the effects of government spending on the aggregate economy and individual, effects of taxation and effects of welfare policies. In short, by the end of this course, the student would be able to clearly see the effect of government policies, government spending, welfare projects, taxation on the welfare of the society as well as on the welfare of the individual himself. In order to go through this course, I would recommend these three books, which would help you out through understanding the various concepts and theories and principles. The first one is Public Finance and Public Choice, an Analytical Perspective, which is the third edition, written by John Cullis and Philip Jones. The second one is Public Finance, a Contemporary Application of Theory to Policy. It is currently being run in 10th edition by David Hyman. And the third one is, which one is a little bit more easier one, which is Public Finance by Maria John Kennedy. All these books would really help you in understanding the various concepts that we would be exploring through this course. Now, let's start with the first lecture, where we would have an overview of public finance. Before taking up any course, it is necessary to understand the importance of that course and how it affects you or your society or your economy. Public finance is few decades back, it was not considered as important as it is considered now. Because now it is considered as a very challenging and interesting field of economics. The subject has gone through very evolutionary changes in terms of policies and their applications and concepts and theories. Additionally, the overall understanding of effects of public finance on economy as a whole at aggregate level and on the individuals in terms of welfare and taxation has been realized to a greater extent. Therefore, it is necessary or very important to analyze the complex issues involved in the public finance. Public finance is basically a branch of economics which is devoted to the study of how government policies, especially taxation and expenditure policies, affects the economy in general. In terms of definition, public finance is a field of economics which is concerned with how governments raise money, how that money is spent, and the effects of these activities on the economy and on the society as a whole. As already mentioned, public finance is also known as public sector economics or public economics. Public finance determines the destiny of a nation. It is about finances of the government and addresses two main questions. First, how much of the total resources should the government gather for itself? And then out of the gathered resources, the second question is how much of those resources should be spent on the economy. Public finance studies basically how governments at all levels, like national, provincial and local level, provides the public with desired services, and then in order to provide these services to the public, they need to have a source of revenue to provide those services again. So how do they fund those services? This all is covered under the field of public finance. Now, in many industrialized countries, spending by the government and taxation by the government form a large portion of the total national economic activity. Like for example, in case of Pakistan, total government spending as per the economic survey of Pakistan is 20% of the nation's gross domestic product. Now, in order to really grasp the concept of the public finance, we need to first define the scope in which this branch of economics operates. In order to understand that scope, we would cover that under three heads. The first one is the functions of the state. The second one is the effects of fiscal operations on economic life. And the third one is the subject matter of public finance. We would cover all of these one by one and in detail so that we can actually understand and grasp the concept of this branch of economics. Now let's go ahead with the first head of the scope of public finance, which is the functions of the state. During the debate or discussion within this head of the scope of public finance, we would be answering a very important question, like what is the need of the government, what is government there for, and why should it exist. Now, the whole classical school of thought revolves around the Say's law, which is that supply creates its own demand. With this, automatically there is full employment, there is perfect information, perfect markets, there is complete price and wage flexibility. Now, under this paradigm, under this scenario, it is difficult to define the role of the government in there, because the markets are self-correcting and markets are efficient and markets are perfect. Information is complete. So, in the classical school of thought, all the economists belonging to that school of thought were of the view that the role of the government within the paradigm of an economic activity should be minimal. The government might only be there to, for example, provide law and order and defense, and the market environment is self-correcting, so there is no need for government intervention in the market. But then After the Great Depression in 1930s, this role of government as a mere observer was challenged in great detail and questioned at many levels, and a new school of thought emerged, which was led by John Maynard Keynes. The Keynesian school of thought emphasized the role of government in correcting the business cycles of an economy. So the whole concept of no intervention by the government or minimal intervention by the government was changed into having a proper role of the government in the economy. So now, when studying the topic of public finance or covering this course, in that case, it would be necessary to explore why the government should be existing in an economy. So, in modern times, the role of the government as merely a police state has also evolved into its welfare role in the society, not just like providing the public goods or regulating the economy, but also providing welfare to the overall society. So in general, it is considered that government should set common rules of behaviors. In that sense, it should provide law and order. Then it should protect its citizens from external threats, which is defense. Poor resources for common goods, like for example the infrastructure required, or dams, or electricity, or water supply, or all those basic necessities that a nation needs to survive and operate efficiently. So these are the responsibilities of the government, and government should also intervene in the system. Since individuals may be unable to evaluate the utility of certain items, like for example elementary education for children. Now here comes the role of the government, because in certain cases people might not be able to evaluate the utility derived from the elementary education of the children, or basic health facilities, so or even for example polio vaccination. So in such cases there is need for the government to intervene in the system. Further, the government also exists to correct certain market failures which might take place in a general course of time. For example, to provide the institutions that allow market to function, like protection of property rights. Then to provide the essential goods and services that markets fail to adequately provide, like for example the private sector might not be interested in providing public utilities of certain types in which individuals are reluctant to pay. Then the private sector would not have an incentive to go into that business venture, like for example street lights, or lighthouses, or making a harbor, constructing a harbor, so all, or cheaper medical facilities. So private sector does not has an incentive to go into that area, and that comes under the responsibilities of the government. Then it also consists of regulating the behavior of business entities, because the shareholders delegate the powers to managers, and that gives rise to principal agent problem, where there is conflict of interest. So based on that conflict of interest, the government needs to intervene in the system to regulate the behavior of business entities through corporate governance paradigm, or creating an organization like Securities and Exchange Commission to monitor and observe, and then or to take action whenever required. And then there are certain like monopoly control authorities just to correct the system, and there is healthy amount of competition in the market. There are broadly two views regarding existing of the government. There is an organic view, and there is a mechanistic view. Organic view treats society as a natural organism where government is its head or its core. So goals of the society are set by the state. Actions of individuals are judged by how much they contribute to the society. So if this is to be summarized in one single quotation, I would say that ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And then there is the mechanistic view of the government, where individuals are paramount or supreme and are of the main interest, and government is created to meet the needs of the individuals. So when individuals' needs are the prime objective, then in the presence of government there is a debate over freedom of the individuals. There are broadly two types of freedom: freedom to do as you like, whatever an individual wants, and the second one is freedom not to suffer from the activities of the other. This second type becomes a more prime objective of the government when the societies grow larger and larger, because in that case an individual is affected by others' actions. How a government operates is it is comprised of thousands of smaller government units, and these thousands of smaller government units are categorized into three tiers of the government: the federal, the provincial, and the local governments. Now each level of the government has its own sources of revenue and has its own objectives and has its own sources of expenditure. Each level is allocated different types of resources, and they are performing different types of objectives. They have their own jurisdiction. They usually do not overlap, or they should never overlap with each other. One of the topics that is mostly discussed in economics debates is the optimal size of the government and the role of the government. Size of the government, most of the economists believe that the government should not grow too large, because that causes hurdles and formalities and bureaucratic formalities and red tapeism. So the size of the government can be calculated by number of government employees and annual expenditure by the government. Then the second debate is about role of the government, whether the government should intervene in the market or not, or the economy or not. And the free market ideology by classical school of thought considers that the government should not intervene at all, but the new Keynesian and Keynesian school of thought considers the intervention by the government. So after going through all the reasons for existence of the government and different views like organic view and mechanistic view and functions of the state and the debate in economic school of thought about role of the government and size of the government, it has been, in my view, established that there is importance of existence of the government to take up certain activities that are not taken up by the private sector by themselves, and to regulate the behavior of entities and to regulate the behavior of the individuals and provide law and order and defense. So it is established now that the role of the government is very important in an economy. Now, having established that, let's move on to the second head of the scope of public finance, where we are trying to establish or define the boundaries in which this course would be covered, and that is the effects of fiscal operations on economic life. Whenever a government takes up any activity, it affects not only the individual at a micro level, but it also affects the economy as a whole at aggregate level. So the whole question is that then if the government exists and it needs to operate, then why do we need public finance? Since the government provides public goods which are government finance items and services like roads and military and lighthouses and street lights and motorways and dams and postal service and health services. Now the private citizens would not voluntarily pay for these services. Since the private citizens would not voluntarily pay for these services, there is no incentive for businesses to produce these services or goods. So since the government needs to provide these services, it also needs a source of revenue to provide these services. Therefore, it is very important to have sources of revenue for the government. Then public finance also enables governments to correct or offset undesirable side effects of a market economy. Whenever the market is left open or free, then there are side effects called spillovers and externalities, and these spillovers and externalities would be discussed in greater detail later in this course, because these are again a major head of this course. For example, households and industries may generate pollution and release it into the environment, and without considering the adverse effect of these this generation of pollution on others. So pollution is a spillover because it affects people who are not responsible for it. One business entity is generating pollution, and somebody who is not associated in any sense to that business entity suffers from that higher level of pollution. So to correct a spillover, government can encourage or restrict certain activities, and this restriction can come through for example, imposition of taxes on that business entity which is producing extra pollution, or for example which may be a tax for polluting the environment, or for example it can pass a law through which certain activities can be restricted or controlled. In this way, the government needs to intervene in the economy or in the system. Then public finance provides governments with programs that moderate the incomes of wealthy and the poor. These programs include social security, welfare and other programs. For example, government would tax individuals who are wealthier and then start social security programs to support those individuals who do not have much income or poor class of the society. For example, like some elderly people or people with disabilities require financial assistance because they cannot work. For example, some children cannot go to school when they cannot afford the school as such. So government can provide them cheaper education, or for example certain individuals of for example lower class cannot afford health services, and then government would provide them cheaper health services or maybe free medical services. So government would redistribute income by collecting taxes from their wealthier citizens to provide resources for the needy ones, and all these taxes are the sources of revenue for the government through which it funds its public goods like roads and dams and lighthouses and street lights, and it also provides support through to people with lower level of incomes through social security programs, through cheaper education, through cheaper health services. So, based on the previous discussion that we have had, the points that we have explored, the need for public finance can be summarized under like a list of reasons why there is a need for public finance. These list of reasons is one of them is taxation, which I've already highlighted a number of times, that it is a source of revenue for the government through which it funds its social security projects, and through which it takes up the provision of public goods to the society at large. Then government can also use taxation to curtail the harmful use of certain products, like for example tobacco and alcohol, and then it can use taxation to eliminate externalities like pollution, the stuff which is harmful for the society and which would affect others, not the polluter themselves. Then the government can also use certain means to protect the infant industries. Now, in developing countries, with opening up of the economy, with so much trade going on and with globalization, certain infant industries can get severe competition from the foreign goods, and that competition would in fact hinder the growth of that infant industry. In that case, the government might intervene through tariff barriers, which again would be a source of revenue for the government, but those tariff barriers are in fact allocated to protect the industry. Like specifically in case of Pakistan, from the period ever since its independence in 1947 through the Ayyub's era, there have been Ayyub's era to Bhutto's era, to almost to by the end of Zia's era, there were excessive tariff and non-tariff barriers on consumer good industries, and those barriers were just there to ensure that our domestic industry is protected from the foreign competition so that it can grow and develop. There was like higher tariffs on imports of foreign goods, foreign consumer goods, and due to cheaper imports of capital, it was possible for private investors to produce those consumer goods in domestically. So since those were infant industries, the tariff barriers protected those industries for a much longer time, and textile industry was one of those industries which needed protection and was given protection for a very long time. So it is again the responsibility of the government to provide employment opportunities. In this case, they offer large-scale projects to give employment opportunities to its citizens. For example, the Metro Bus project in Lahore, or the Metro Bus project in Rawalpindi, or building a motorway, or maybe building a dam, or having larger projects like that. Or building national highways, and all those projects create employment opportunities for its citizens. Then government might also take up projects in far-flung or rural areas where the private sector does not have any incentive to go. Just because of the cost of taking up that project over there, maybe just because of lower demand of their product in those rural areas. So it is the government's responsibility to take up certain projects in far-flung areas, and then they would create employment opportunities for those individuals residing in rural areas. Another role of the public finance or the government is economic planning, specifically the 5-year plan, in which the government would take up some projects and activities which would create infrastructure, or which would create opportunities for the future generation, or for the investors from abroad, or local investors as well, and to attract investment for the growth of the economy. And these long-term plans are very necessary for growth, and of course they do not come without a cost, and if they do not come without a cost, then the government needs to have a source of revenue. Then there is creating equality in the society. Equality would mean poor individuals or individuals at lower income classes who cannot afford health services, education, or any other basic necessities. The government can subsidize those activities and through their fiscal incentives, and then to the wealthier individuals they can start a system of progressive taxation, which actually takes place in Pakistan. Progressive taxation is the taxation which increases with the level of income. Through this mechanism, through progressive taxation, they tax the individuals with higher levels of incomes and provide services to the individuals with lower levels of income to create equality in the economy. Then there is optimal utilization of resources, which is very, very important for the developing countries. Because usually or mostly the developing countries are wasting most of the resources, and those resources are not directed towards or not optimally used in the sectors in which they are required. So the government can intervene in the economy through taxation or through subsidies or giving incentives to the industry for production of those goods, in which way they are channeling those resources, those scarce resources, to the production or to consumption and distribution, of course. Then I guess I missed one point, that is economic stability, which is again one of the very important, you can say, part of the public finance, because economy fluctuates from its peaks to its towards depressions, and that fluctuation is not very healthy, because that affects the employment, that affects the aggregate demand, that affects the consumption. So for short-term fluctuations, monetary policies are used, but to control those, to ensure the long-term growth, governments use fiscal policies. So through these fiscal incentives, government can tax, which we would have some examples to explain. The governments can use taxes and subsidies and start projects in the times of like depressions, where there is higher unemployment levels, to ensure more employment opportunities, and they can curtail those business fluctuations or tone down those business fluctuations to economic cycle fluctuations, to ensure that economy stays on a consistent path of growth. Then there are savings and investments, which are very essential for the growth of an economy. It is actually a part of the whole model of economic growth. These savings and investments are essential for future generations. These savings and investments are very, very essential for capital formation in an economy, which again, as I said, is a very important part of economic, a very important factor for economic growth. So government can also use taxes and subsidies to channel savings and investments in the right direction in the sectors in which they are needed. Then subsidies and grants are again very important, which are part of the public finance and are used by the government to create equality in the society. All these 9 factors that have been discussed, which explain that why public finance is needed, are at some level interlinked with each other, of course. They cannot be isolated from each other, and they are like of prime importance and they affect the economy as a whole. So for example, if government spending and taxation directly affect the economic performance, we can see that through an example. For example, if the government increases spending to build highways or build maybe dams or take up any important project, then it would create jobs. and when people would have jobs, they would have more incomes, and when they would have more incomes, they would use that to consume more goods, and when they consume more goods, the economy tends to grow. So there is a whole cycle through which the economy can go by a big project by the government. But then opposite can also take place. The government can increase taxes, and through increasing their taxes, they can control the consumption of households and business entities, and that would reduce their spending or their purchasing power, and the economy tends to shrink. So this is how public finance can be used to tone down the business cycles of an economy. Under discussion of the second head of public finance, which was how public finance affects the economic life, it has been established that the government's projects, government's taxation, government's spending, government's deficits, or every action of the government to for example, create equality, or to stabilize the economy, or to protect the infant industry, or to ensure efficient allocation of resources, and to promote savings and investments, to grant subsidies. All these factors affect have a major repercussion for the economy, as a major factor promoting growth in the economic life, and they do affect the aggregate economy, and they do affect the welfare of each and every individual at micro level. So this also is covered under the scope of finance, scope of public finance. Then moving on to the third scope of public finance, which is the subject matter of public finance. This is the final head in which we are trying to define the scope of public finance. We need to briefly explore the public expenditure, the public revenue, the fiscal policy, and public debt. Every year, national, provincial, and local governments create a budget to determine how much money they will spend during the upcoming year. The budget determines which public goods to produce, which spillovers or externalities to correct, and how much assistance to provide to financially disadvantaged people, or in terms of welfare and social securities. Now, the chief administrator of that part of the government, such as the Prime Minister or or the governor of a province, or like head of local government, proposes the budget. Now the legislature, such as the parliament, provincial council, or municipality council, ultimately must pass the budget. Now the legislature often makes changes in the sizes of the budget, but it makes sure that those changes are not rejected again by the chief administrator using the veto powers. So it is a process in which the total public spending is defined in an economy through firstly budgeting the expenses and then taking up those expenses later on. So the government spending takes two forms. It is one of them is exhaustive spending, and the other one is transfer spending. Exhaustive spending refers to the purchases made by the government for the production of public goods. For example, when the government intends to start a building of a new harbour, the government buys and uses resources from the economy, such as labour and raw material. The same would go if the government of Pakistan plans to start a windmill project for electricity generation, or for example they plan to construct a new dam for electricity generation, or maybe take up the aqueduct project, and all those public spendings would be termed as exhaustive spendings because they would be using the resources of the economy, and the human resource, the labor, and the raw material. Then there is transfer spending, in which the government transfers income to the people to help support themselves, to lower classes of individuals, mostly lower income groups. Now transfers can be of broadly two types, maybe in cash or maybe in kind. In cash transfers can be social security payments, pension payments, welfare payments, and in kind transfer do not involve cash but instead transfer of goods and services to the recipients. For example, it might include food stamps, coupons, Medicare, and stuff like that, in which the cash is not being transferred. Now, in order to fund all that expenditure, the spending that we have discussed, the government needs to have a source of revenue to pay for these activities, because these activities are mostly costly, because in certain cases government might generate revenue from charging the fees, for example the payment that one needs to make while getting on a motorway, or maybe entering a park or a public park maybe, or some minimal fees that we have to pay in public hospitals. And all those fees are not enough to finance those public sector activities or public goods, because those goods are costly and the government is actually subsidizing those goods for us for consumption. So there must be other sources of revenue that the government needs, and for that most of the revenue of the government comes from taxation. It might be, for example, income tax or capital tax, and sales and excise taxes. Generally, the taxes are divided into two broad categories: the direct taxes and the indirect taxes. The taxes on incomes, profits, land are mostly the direct taxes, and the taxes on the consumption of goods and sale of goods are indirect taxes. Now, generally, it is accepted that as the economy grows, because of substantial structural changes in the economy, since the consumption of the individuals is increasing and that consumption is financed by their incomes, so it is highly possible that their incomes are increasing, and as the economy grows, the total contribution of direct taxation should increase as against the indirect taxation, which unluckily is not the case for Pakistan. Our indirect taxation has much more contribution in total tax revenue as compared to the direct taxation. We might discuss these tax revenues in greater detail later in this course, but let's just have a brief overview of different types of taxes and in terms of public revenue. And the most important source of tax revenue for most of the countries, including Pakistan and other industrialized countries, is the income or payroll tax, also known as the personal income tax. These income taxes are imposed on the provision of labor or activities that generate income, such as wages or salaries. In United States, income taxes account for about half of the total revenue of local, state and federal governments combined. But again, as I said, that this is not the case in Pakistan. Our income tax revenue is much less than other sources of revenue. Another important source of government revenue is the capital tax. Capital tax includes items or facilities that generate profits, such as factories, business machineries and real estate. In fact, all the business entities. It is often sometimes called profit taxes. One kind of capital tax that is collected in Pakistan as well by the almost all the federal governments, is the corporate income tax. Then in terms of direct taxation, there is also a property tax. Property tax is a capital tax used by state and local governments and are levied on items such as houses and boats. These all are types of direct taxes. Then there are sales and excise taxes, which are again a major source of government tax revenue. Many state and local governments levy a sales tax on the purchases of certain items. Consumer usually pay a percentage of the total sale price as the tax. Excise taxes are used by all three levels of the government, local, provincial and federal government. And excise taxes are levied on specific products such as alcohol, cigarettes and fuel or oil or petrol. Now, why these sales taxes are also used to curtail the use of extensive use of certain harmful products. For example, the government may tax cigarettes extensively to ensure that its consumption is reduced. Then another important part of this public finance is the fiscal policy. It is the way the government spends and taxes to influence the performance of the economy. As already discussed, let us go a little back when we discussed that in classical school of thought there was no intervention by the government. Then in 1930s, John Maynard Keynes led the Keynesian school of thought, in which there was intervention by the government and through fiscal incentives, through fiscal operations. Now, in order to tone down the business cycles of an economy, in those times it was highly considered that fiscal policy was the only tool to generate more employment, because Keynes showed that employment can be increased by fiscal incentives, and that was shown basically by the World War II, that because of extensive military operations, most of the industries were converted into military goods production industries, and consumption goods were also extensively produced, and that resulted into USA getting out of the depression. Ever since then, fiscal policy was considered as one of the major tools to tone down the recessions and of the economy. So along with that, later on, and currently it is widely accepted that monetary policy as well as the fiscal policy both play a role together in controlling the recessions and depressions of an economy, or toning down the business cycles of an economy. So, in short, fiscal policy is very, very important for an economy. Now, another important aspect is public deficits. Now, another important aspect, after discussing the public spending, the public revenue and fiscal policy, another important aspect that is covered under the subject matter of public finance is government deficits or fiscal deficits. Every time the governments spend more than it receives, it runs a fiscal deficit. It would mean that the expenditure or spending by the government is much, much more than the revenue it has generated. Governments finance those deficits by borrowing money from the domestic as well as international organizations, or domestic. They might generate funds to finance that deficit domestically as well as internationally. Now, deficit spending by borrowed funds instead of greater taxation is can be helpful for the economy. Now there is a very huge debate in public finance, or in the overall various schools of thoughts of economics, that public deficits are right or wrong, because there is a whole school of thought which believes that budget should always be balanced, because the burden of the deficit goes on the next generation, not on the generation which is causing the deficit. So if that deficit is burden on the next generation or the future generation, the government should ensure that it always balances the budget, and it would never help an economy. But then, for example, and a very notable economist like Tobin is of the view that budget deficits can also be very, very helpful for the economy. Like, for example, if a government runs a budget deficit by constructing more schools, or improving the quality of education, or giving better health services, or maybe constructing more motorways or dams, or highways and public utilities, and producing more gas or fuel. So if a government runs deficits for such kind of things, such kind of projects, that would generate more revenue in the future, and that would support more economic growth. In that perspective, the future generation would be better off with that deficit, in terms of getting all those extra services or all those benefits from all those government projects. So in that sense, deficits are good for the economy. So if we summarize all this debate or this argument by various economists that deficits are good, in that case we would come to a conclusion, or we might come to a conclusion that deficits are good, but what all matters is that where that spending is channeled into. If the deficit is financed, if a government runs a deficit by wasteful expenditures, then that would actually be a burden on the future generation. But if that deficit is run due to building more dams and infrastructure and health and education facilities, then the future generation is going to benefit due to higher returns from all those projects. So development projects by the government might be financed by deficits, rather than just plain operational expenditure of the government. And this is where it comes to the question about the size of the government, which we were discussing earlier. If the size of the government is too large, then most of the expense of the government, or most of the revenue generated by the government, would not go into the projects. It would go into funding the operational activities of that huge government. And in certain cases, when the size of public sector is too large, it might hinder the economic growth. And it might also represent more control by the government, because in certain studies, in empirical studies, authors proxy the government control by using the number of public sector employees. Actually, in fact, I did that too in my study, where I used the proxy of government control as number of government employees. And if the government control is too extensive in the economy, that results in more bureaucratic control, that results in more formalities, and that results in the shadow sector of the economy. I wonder if you already know about the shadow sector, because that is my area of interest basically, apart from the public finance as a whole. Shadow economy is the economy in which people or individuals or business entities avoid to pay taxes. When they avoid to pay taxes, they use the public sector services which they do not pay for. In that sense, there are activities that are not recorded by the GDP and that go into the shadow sector. Well, that is a very big debate and that is a very big topic to be covered right now. We will come back to that later, because when we discuss taxation in detail, we would need to explore certain aspects of the shadow economy or unofficial sector or parallel economy. It has so many names because it is so difficult, or it is so interesting topic to explore. So in other words, if the government is too big, and if the government is size of the government is wasteful, then that would result into externalities itself. We'll discuss that in detail when we go to other topics, or when we go to in the contents deeply. In order to explore the role of the deficits, we can show a very simple example. Like, let's assume when the unemployment is high and the economy might be going into a recession in those times. So what a government can do, it can uptake a project that uses workers which would be idle otherwise. Now, if they use those workers, let's assume the government starts building a very big road, and in case of Pakistan, which has a lots of labor force, it should use a labor intensive process of production. So when they use the labor intensive process of production, the idle individuals would be employed, and they would, again, as we discussed earlier, they would have more buying power and they would spend in the economy, and economy would get into a cycle of improvement. However, deficit spending can also be very harmful. In previous case, it was the extra pumping of funds and money in the economy that boosted the economy. But let's assume that unemployment rate is lower and economy is already close to being overheated or already going up. So in that case, if government pumps in more money and starts a project, the labor is scarce, and that would create more competition. And when that would create more competition, the prices or the wage rates of resources and would go up. And when the wages and prices would go up, that kind of a project at the time of when the economy is overheating, that kind of a project would cause more inflation and would cause more increases in the prices. That would inflate the wages and that would inflate the prices of the resources. So deficit financing can be harmful in times like this, and it can be useful in times of recession. Now, having established the scope of public finance under three heads, namely the functions of the state, the effects of fiscal operations on economic life, and the subject matter of public finance, we have established that governments are very important due to their certain roles in an economy. We have established that the fiscal operations of the government have an effect on the economic life, and we have established that the revenue, the expenditure, and fiscal policy and deficit financing are very important factors which affect the aggregate economy as a whole, and they also affect the individual's welfare. So, after having this, let us consider more three major fiscal functions, which are one of them is allocation function, the second one is distribution function, and the third one is stabilization function. Please do remember that none of these activities of the government work in isolation, because it is a dynamic environment which is prevailing. It is not like a natural science experiment in which you can hold certain things constant and conduct an experiment. In social sciences, specifically in case of public finance, whenever government increases taxation, it cannot hold the whole economy constant. So all these things work together, and one tax effect of the government might have multiple repercussions. So as we discussed, that the role of the government is very dynamic. It has so many objectives to take up, and so these fiscal functions, allocation function, distribution function and stabilization function, are interrelated to each other in one way or the other. Now let's see first the allocation function. Allocation of total resources between private goods and social goods, that is one of the functions of fiscal operations by the government, that they need to allocate the resources because there are limited resources in an economy, so they need to define how much resources to contribute towards production of public goods or social goods, and how much resources to give towards private goods, and then again they need to choose between the mix of social goods, like how many hospitals to build, and how many schools to build, and how many teachers to finance, and how many doctors to finance, and how many more engineers to produce. So, and the government uses taxation and its spending as major tools for controlling the allocation function. They need to allocate resources among various business entities and among various production mechanisms, and then they can also use non-fiscal regulatory instruments, like for example in case of Pakistan in early years it was mandate of the government to ensure that capital imported in the country is very cheap, so that the country can produce domestically most of the consumer goods. So what they did was is that they taxed imported consumer goods highly, but they did not tax imported capital that much. So the result was that capital was very cheap to import in the country, and that is how the consumer good industry was established in Pakistan. So it is very important how to for the government to understand, or for the individuals to understand, that what is government is trying to do when they are trying to allocate resources among public and private goods or within the private goods. Then there is distribution function, distribution of income and wealth between various classes. Now again the government would use taxes and subsidies as major tools to distribute the resources between various income classes. For example, as we already discussed, that government uses progressive taxation to tax individuals with higher incomes more than the individuals with lower incomes. That is called progressive taxation. As your income increases, you move into a higher bracket, and the tax rate on higher bracket is higher than the tax on the lower bracket. So that is called progressive taxation. Now that progressive taxation is collected and pooled by the government, and then they start various projects and they provide public sector services at cheaper rates, like health services, education, and all the types of services that they need to provide. So public goods are financed, and then they can also give subsidies to maybe poor farmers for or cheaper loans for harvesting the next crop, or buying a tractor, or mechanizing their farm. So as a whole, the economy is, the government is using taxes to distribute resources between private and public wants. So you see, there is a relationship between the distribution function and the allocation function of fiscal functions of the government. Under distribution function, when they are distributing between income within various classes, they are also distributing the resources or allocating the resources using the distribution function between private and public wants. Then there is a stabilization function of the economy. As already discussed in the previous slides, one of the aim of fiscal operation is to tone down the effects of economic cycles. Government can influence unemployment and price level and output, and that is how they tone down the business cycle. If the unemployment is very high and they need to reduce the unemployment level, they would invest in the economy and take up a project. and when they take up a project, people would get hired and would be get paid, and they would buy more consumption goods, and that would result into boosting up the economy and reducing the unemployment rate. And similarly, if the price level is too high, they can reduce the taxes so people can buy those products and their incomes in real terms are increased. Or maybe if the economy is overheating, they can increase the taxes to curtail the consumption and investment, consumption by the individuals and investment by the business entities. So in turn, they are controlling the business cycles, and they are managing the total output of the economy. So it is again a very important function of the economy, and as I have discussed many times before in this same lecture, in which we are just giving an overview of public finance, that is, the fiscal policies of the government are used for stabilization of the economy, which was basically Keynesians, which basically originated from the Keynesian school of thought. Now, with all this, when we have established the importance of public finance, we have established the importance of the role of the government, we have established the importance of public spending, public revenues, we have established the importance of those fiscal incentives or fiscal functions, and we have established in the end that all the fiscal operations by the government have an effect on the economic life. I would like to summarize once again what we have covered in this lecture before we end it and before you get off and do whatever you want to do. Public finance we defined as a field of economics which is concerned with how governments raise money, how that money is spent, and the effects of these activities on the economy and society. I hope now you clearly understand that every action by the government has an effect not just on the economy, because when we say the economy, we just mean the economy of the country, but we do not understand the implication of that. And the implication is that actually affects us at micro level, every individual. Then we define the scope of the public finance under three heads: the functions of the state. We established that government needs to be there because governments has certain roles in an economy. Then government, the two views of the government, organic and mechanistic view, we discussed that, which was again very important. Then we discussed that government plays certain roles in an economy, which is, for example, number one was police role, providing law and order. The number two was defense role, protecting its citizen. The third one was to pool the resources for future projects. Then number three was intervening in the economy to provide property rights and protection, and then intervening in the economy to control the business entities in terms of monopoly control authorities and corporate governance paradigm through Securities and Exchange Commissions. These are again all the roles of the government or functions of the government which were discussed under the head of scope of public finance. The second one was the effects of fiscal operations on economic life, and I have emphasized it time and again and many times that during even in this lecture, because I emphasize that a lot. I wonder why. But the point is that every action by the government affects us, because I know that it affects me, and so you should know that it affects you. In any case, every action by the government affects us. Government can use fiscal policies, public spending, public expenditure, or public revenues through taxation and through giving, for example, through tariff barriers or like excises and sales tax and income taxes and property taxes. They affect the economy, and those taxes and those subsidies by the government is used to allocate the resources where they want to allocate them. And the third one is the subject matter of public finance, in which we covered the four major areas. Now all these things would be discussed in greater detail in the future lectures. This was just an overview. So the role of the government which we have established was very important, and the scope of public finance which we have established again, that it is very important, but the role of the government has increased with considering the welfare role of the government, not just a police state. Then we have established the importance of public revenue, expenditure, debt and fiscal policies. Then we have highlighted the three major fiscal functions: the allocation function, the distribution function, and the stabilization function of the economy. Now, by the end of this lecture, I hope you are better able to understand or to comprehend the importance of public finance in your everyday life and every action of the government, be it like fiscal action or a policy action, or for example through a policy without involving any monetary reward or benefit. It affects us, and it affects us a lot. So it is very, very important to study the scope of, to study the subject of public finance, to improve your understanding of the government and its roles. And it is again very important to understand the various theories and various concepts that are involved in the field of public finance, because there are theories of taxation, there are theories of government expenditure, there is discussion on fiscal policies. So I hope to see you again. Thank you.